Okay, welcome everybody to this Festival of Urbanism event titled Many Hands, Many Actors, Many Ideas, Unpacking Parramatta's Urban Design. My name's Greta Werner. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Henry Halloran Urban and Regional Research Initiative. The initiative is a cross-university, cross-disciplinary research initiative dedicated to dialogue and evidence-based discussion between researchers, policy people, industry experts and the wider community. So before going any further, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the Parramatta lands of the Darrigal people and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal people here today. And so now I'd like to introduce Dina, who's curated this event today. Dina Ridenour is Senior Lecturer and Sydney Horizon Educator at the Sydney University School of Architecture, Design and Planning, where she teaches urban design theory and practice in the Master of Urban Design, Master of Urbanism and Bachelor of Architecture and Environment programs. Dina is also undertaking doctoral research addressing urban design methods for creating better urban neighbourhoods, a case study of design participation with young adolescents. So with that, I'll hand over to Dina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And I'd like to thank the festival for convening today's walk that we just had, as well as the panel. And I'd also like to thank the Urban Design Association of New South Wales for putting together the proposal for this event and supporting the organisation of today's walk and panel. The UDA New South Wales mission is to advance urban design as a profession, playing an essential role in shaping better built environments. And I'd also like to thank the panelists for contributing their experience and insights in Parramatta and its design. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panel, and then I'll give more specific bios when each person's talking. But I'd just like to introduce from my right along the stage here, Philip Grouse, who's a PhD candidate and a UNSW City Centres Research Centre, adjunct professor of UTS and former director of the Western City Deal and Greater City Commission. Kelly van der Zanen, who's Group Manager of City Design at the City of Parramatta. Kalantha Brigham, who's Director of Strategy, Design and Delivery, Greater Sydney Parklands. And Philip Vivian, who's Managing Director of Bates Smart and has been doing an urban design consultancy for Metro West Parramatta Station and its precinct. And Gigi Lombardi, who is from Transport New South Wales and Acting Urban Design Director. Okay, I'd like to start by just giving a bit of an overview of Parramatta to provide some context on each of our panelists' specific experience. So I'd like to say that Parramatta is home to the Burmadical people of the Darug Nation. Burmata, now Parramatta, means where the eels lie down, and it's forever linking Parramatta, its river, and Burmadical country. The river is an important part of Australia's ancient, recent past, and its future, where land and water link all aspects of First Nations people's spiritual, cultural, and social existence. Colonization has forever changed the lives of First Nations people. The river and Parramatta representing environmental changes, invasion, trauma, and loss. And so recognition of country is a critical part of Parramatta's story, reconciliation, and healing. Colonial settlement established the foundation of today's city with Government Farm, the layout of Parramatta Town, and the alignment of George Street and its termination at Government House, now in Parramatta Park. This very simple plan illustrates the essence of the urban core of Parramatta and its paradoxical relationship to the river. The earlier town hall location in this plan locates at Church Street and what is now Parramatta Street, and has a direct relationship to the river in its vista. But this also contrasts with the lot pattern, which began this pattern we now have of turning our back on the river, a challenge for today's city river strategy and its reclamation of the river as the city's frontage. Historically, the river has been the edge to the city. And although today the city extends well into the north and well to the south, the city core, which is the focus of our talk today, is a relatively small footprint contained by the river, the rail line, which was extended from Granville in the 1860s, Parramatta Park, and Thomas Rest Park. Its structure is characterized by its Georgian grid, which is what's outlined here in red, which also shows that there's very large blocks in Parramatta, approximately 150 to 260 meters long. And this containment of the city core and its block pattern creates a very dense urban core, which you can see emerging around us, and brings challenges for pedestrian permeability and new public spaces. The challenges of guiding the change of Parramatta extends. The city has long been touted as Sydney's second CBD and now re-envisioned as Sydney's river city. Parramatta is experiencing a step change in growth with an emerging city skyscraper skyline. Government investment in Parramatta Square and its occupation of commercial buildings is attracting greater variety of commercial use to the city, creating a more diverse, lively city centre. It's also attracting universities, cultural institutions to the city. The challenges of guiding the change of Parramatta extend to the quality and extent of its public spaces. Parramatta, like much of Sydney's west, is impacted by urban heat and needs solutions for urban cooling. Parramatta needs more space to cater to future residents, workers, and visitors. Making great streets for people requires transforming vehicle-oriented streets to pedestrian priority spaces with higher quality amenity for all abilities and ages. Leveraging the river and existing open spaces through new strategies for the City River, Parramatta Way, Sydney's Green Grid, and Parramatta Park are essential to elevating the city's identity, the health of its citizens, and the quality of life. Parramatta's historic street and block pattern has provided a legacy for its major opportunity to change. The takeover of the centre by the blocks in the 1970s by car parking, this aerial photo, has provided an opportunity of government land ownership in the core. And so this map shows in yellow the amount of land that council owned in the city centre, which has been a direct catalyst for the projects that you now see emerging in the city, being Parramatta Square here, the Metro, Civic Link, and the Powerhouse Parramatta. The emerging public spaces of Parramatta build on its historic bone structure to create a memorable place within the city's core, reclaim its relationship to the river, and celebrate its heritage and increase the amenity and comfort of the city. Transport investment makes Parramatta more connected to the broader metropolitan Sydney and is leveraged to create more livable streets and quality public spaces that invite people to come live an urban lifestyle in the West. New cultural facilities combined with the use and adaptation of heritage buildings are linked by Civic Link in the river to create a network of public spaces and cultural uses, including Council's 5 library, where we are now, Powerhouse Parramatta, and Riverside Theatres. Reconciliation is supported by opportunities for First Nations Walk, the recognition and integration of First Nations stories within public spaces of Parramatta Square, the Welcome Plaza at Metro, and along Civic Link to the river. The change of Parramatta is shepherded by many hands. The urban design of the city is not the vision of one designer, but the collective shaping and revelation of opportunities over time. It's hard work to bring together the many disciplines and experts that contribute to the city's future. The 4 central blocks of the core of Parramatta Centre are undergoing a significant transformation across a suite of city-shaping infrastructure, public space, and built-form projects. Today's panel will share their experiences in the revitalisation of the Parramatta City Centre by exploring the challenges, opportunities, and sometimes surprising creative leaps that deliver major urban change. Okay, so our first speaker is Philip Grouse. He's a registered urban designer with the UDA New South Wales, a recognized urban designer with the Urban Design Group in the UK, adjunct professor UTS. Philip has worked in architecture and urban design for over 35 years in Australia, the US, and the UK. He was a director of Cox Architects between 1992 and 2017, joining the Greater Sydney Commission in 2018 as director of the Western City Deal. He was involved in planning and urban design of the Western Sydney Aerotropolis precincts and more broadly on the Western Parkland City. He's currently completing a PhD at the City Futures Research Centre at UNSW, examining the role of urban design in metropolitan planning, and is a member of Government Architects New South Wales State Design Review Panel. Please welcome Philip.
I submitted the PhD last Thursday, so it's done. Hey, why don't I stand? I've been asked to talk about 3 things very, very quickly. The first one is, what does urban design do? What's its role in the governance of our cities? And how does it work across the scales from the city to places for people and country? Can you just go click? Is that the first? Just go back. Just go back one. Okay. Let's start with that. So urban designers, I think, are known for largely designing the public places and spaces in the built environment. But my question is that enough? Because I don't think it is. Increasingly, urban design is going to need to provide physical design directions at all scales of city's growth and change. And the reason is we need to respond to the drivers that are rescaling and reshaping our cities. The first one is climate change, urban heat in Western Sydney, obviously, globalism, and the role of Parramatta outside its immediate region. Climate change in particular will challenge what we as urban designers do, I think, and how we do it. And increasingly, we're going to have to address what I call a pervasive planning urban design divide, and that's creating a lot of the poor outcomes we're seeing. So just if you look at the left, that's what I call business as usual. On the left, there is planning. It's top down. The state has the major role. Councils, urban designers have that minor role. When we go across to urban design, the state has the less role, the local has the bigger role. One's bottom up, one's top down. On the right is where I think we need to move, and it's being referred to as a design continuum or design governance, which is really what is happening in most countries in the world at the moment, where we have an iterative backwards forwards between planning urban design. At the moment, planners are in an area, urban designers are in an area, there's a lack of understanding, I think, between the two, and that is simply not sustainable. Go to the next slide, please. So this is what I think it looks like. On the left there, we need to think of the city as a series of infrastructures. They're spatial and they work beyond the scale of the region. So you look at the top there, we have the water systems, we have green systems. They need to work together or we won't cool the city. We have country and we have transport. They're all equally important. And what we need to do, and this is what we were doing at the GSC and the planning partnership, if you look at the top, the green infrastructures go from city down to local. So does transport. They need to go backwards, forwards, but we also need to go up and down scales. Otherwise, when we look at the right-hand side, we want to create a series of places. If when we make the big decisions up front, we don't understand that, we'll end up with something that looks like it's well connected, and then you end up, say, with Parramatta previously in the busway, cutting the place in half. They were making decisions not cognizant of the physical outcome, which is what we call plain governance. If we just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so working across scales between country and looking at urban structures, how does this work? How does design work? So I think a more promising and sustainable approach can be described as landscape-led, as adopted in the Western Parkland City, which we called Parkland Oriented Development, developed with Rod Simpson, who was the Environment Commissioner at the time, or an urban ecology. It amplifies urban design and designing with country up to the scale of the region. So when we look here, step one is starting with the blue and the ochre, which we call place keeping rather than place making, understanding the place, understanding the water, the topography, how the land works, and then looking at the green, which adds to what's there, connecting places, creating a green grid so that the blue and the green work together. If the landscape and if the green is not watered, the trees don't transpire when it's very hot in Western Sydney, and it's of no use, so they must go together. Then step three is then look at transit. So we look at where amenity is, and then we put the transit a few blocks from the blue-green, which is like Sydney was. You look at New South Head Road, Rose Bay, Double Bay, the development on the harbour, and then you had the roads. And then we look at urban development, which is a combination of transport, blue-green, and so we call this Parkland-oriented development, as opposed to TOD, which is good because it's walkable, but it's become the orthodoxy and it's not answering change. So we retain the neighbourhood concept, but we turn living on transit upside down and propose that we live in amenity and walk to transport rather than the other way around. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Kelly van der Zanden. Kelly's a seasoned urban designer and planning professional currently serving as Group Manager City Design at the City of Parramatta. With a career spanning planning and public and private sector, as well as international consultancy in the Netherlands, Kelly has played a pivotal role in shaping and advocating for visionary design, strategic planning, and collaborative leadership. Her portfolio includes past roles at Lancome, Ethos Urban, JBA, Hassel, Grantmij, and New South Wales local government. These experiences have equipped her with a deep understanding of the complexities of urban transformation, infrastructure delivery, and public space design. Please welcome Kelly.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you, everyone. Good to see you here today. My role is to chat a bit about urban design within local government and really about the long game. So to understand that, one of the things I'm going to do is just step back in time a little bit to understand how the discipline actually evolved as a core function, and in this case I'm referring to the City of Parramatta, but generally in local government. So back in the early 2000s there was a growing recognition for the value of urban design and what it could bring to traditional town planning. And in Parramatta's context, it was entering a period of rapid growth, and there was a need to better contemplate, was sort of forced to contemplate built form and public domain outcomes that were changing rapidly, and we needed to do that very early in the process. So this pressing need for embedding the city's broader vision and sort of spatial logic into a traditional planning framework in the documents meant that we needed to introduce skilled urban design professionals into the organisation. And at that time, it was uncommon for local government to have urban designers on board. So there was a recognition of that, and thankfully, in the city of Parramatta's case, the Lord Mayor at the time, David Borger, who many of you may know is a big city advocate, had a deep appreciation for that nexus between planning, urban design, architecture, and how all those disciplines come together for the greater city-making experience. So council resolved to establish an urban design team. That was back in 2005, and it was a team of 3 people. 2 decades later, we're a team of 30, and we're deeply embedded in the planning directorate and the planning teams. And I think that's really fundamental and foundational to ensuring that we have a voice and we're informing key planning functions. So I think it's really just a thought process around it's not like urban design in local government isn't just about what's built today, it's about shaping that DNA of the city. And I've just got a little diagram up there around establishing that strategic vision, and then how urban design frameworks and master planning and the circle of those considerations, including consultation with the community, come into play before we actually get into implementing a plan. And that takes, from the zooming out, focusing on the big picture, forward thinking, and bridging those disciplines across planning, urban design, architecture, and translating that into policy, establishing a governance process around that so that it can be collaborative and eventually evolve to future outcomes. So that's all about the long game, and that's influencing not just what gets built, but why it gets built and how it fits into the city's evolving character. So on that, it's sort of important to, thanks Dina, next slide, yep. Think about how from small things, big things come. And I just want to reflect on Civic Link and Metro. It's been mentioned a few times already, and the context is set. But how this came to be, and it was, the genesis was really back in 2005, and the city was sort of changing in the way that the commercial drivers were pushing for a bigger second CBD. Dina referred to some of the challenges and conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, and intuitively humans would find their own way between buildings and to move from the railway station to the river. And Dina made reference to the large city blocks. So we were thinking about the scale of these blocks and how permeable that was between some key attractors in the city. So back in 2005, those first seeds were planted, and the vision was to create a vibrant pedestrian corridor connecting the railway and the river. At the time, that was really about small interventions, and it was around trying to activate some of those key pedestrian links. And so we went through a process of, sorry, I'll show that second image up there is actually right here where we're sitting, where this building is sitting, and it shows you the poor amenity of a small pedestrian link that leads to one of those large car parks Dina was referring to that sat prime within the centre of these large blocks. But we knew we could have small interventions like punching holes in the wall, activating laneways, and that's where the genesis of this project started. It took on its own momentum. That was embraced by council, and then it became something more formal in a policy nature where the project evolved. There was then some broader design thinking through Design Parramatta, and eventually onto a framework plan back in 2017, which seems a long time ago now, but we're talking now 2025. This is 20 years in the making, and to Dina's words, many hands in that process. So from the Civic Link framework plan, where council endorsed, adopted and formally embedded that into its governance structure and documents, so began the process of delivering what we are now seeing realised out here. So next slide, thanks Dina. From that large-scale visioning and concept, we dive down into the progression of more specific policy where design gets its teeth. You can see very detailed language around the block structure and specifics around that. And then what happened is Metro came into the picture, and because we had a framework and a vision, we were able to advocate for those outcomes with key stakeholders, being the state government in this case. Without that, it would have been very difficult to drive those outcomes, and the vision that had been established some years prior may not have been realised. So it's really critical in that process that controls are written, endorsed and supported to ensure local government can advocate for the outcomes that are supported by the community and ultimately the benefit of the whole city. So that was one of the major projects that you know, you can talk to the long game and how it was conceived so long ago. In the same instance, Riverside Theatres was a major civic project where there was a greater vision that was established by council. Whilst there was a design competition run, the key to that was all in the design competition brief and embedding that urban design thinking into those documents so that it could guide the architects and designers into the ultimate outcome, which is, there is an image on screen there. But where you've got an illustration of the broader context, these were the prescriptive outcomes that council was driving to realise that end state. And on the next slide, Dina, you can see the winning scheme that you all would have seen announced last year. The key being how that integrates into the city, and the policy driver in that was all written into the competition brief and ultimately realised here. So thank you, Dina.
I'll introduce you first.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Our next speaker is Kalantha Brigham. She's an architect and urban designer who's worked across state, local government, and the university sector. She's passionate about the role designers can play in achieving positive social, cultural, and environmental outcomes. In 2023, Kalantha was the Rothwell Resident in Urban Design at the School of Architecture, Design, and Planning, where she undertook research and teaching on the role of designers in local government. Kalantha is currently Director of Strategy, Design, and Delivery at Greater Sydney Parklands. Prior to Greater Sydney Parklands, she spent 8 years at the City of Parramatta Council, leading transformational projects as an urban designer and manager of the city transformation team, contributing to Design Parramatta, the creation of the Parramatta City River Strategy, and the Civic Link Framework Plan. Please welcome Kalantha.
Thanks, Dina. Thanks, everyone. So I've been asked to reflect on the role of creativity, community and culture in Parramatta's urban design through the lens of 3 projects I was involved in, some of which have been touched on already. Design Parramatta, the City River Strategy and the Civic Link Framework Plan. In 2012, I didn't realise I was controlling slides myself. I know. Oh yeah, maybe. In 2012, I was seconded from the New South Wales Government Architect's Office to Parramatta City Council, joining urban designer Katie Westlake on her bold creative mission, which was this project, Design Parramatta, a project to bring new ideas to the city. It was inspired by Sydney Spaces, which was a project the City of Sydney had led to revamp Sydney's public domain before the Olympics. And Design Parramatta brought together 19 design teams to reimagine 16 public spaces across the CBD. You can see those spaces there in little vignettes on the left. Over 100 architects, artists and landscape architects collaborated over a 6-week period to come up with new ideas for the city. But the project did more than just generate concept designs for public space. It also began to shift perceptions of what Parramatta could be. Creativity really became a catalyst for redefining Parramatta as Sydney's second city. The design teams reimagined historic streets and public spaces and proposed a number of artistic interventions. It didn't just change how designers saw Parramatta, it sparked planning changes, inspired public projects and drew people into a shared mission, improving the city centre. I became one of those early believers and within months of finishing this project left government architects to help lead the next project I'm talking about, which is the City River Strategy. So community was central to the preparation of this strategy. The genesis of this project was reconnecting the city to its river along the 1.5 km edge from Charles Street Square up to O'Connell Street. You can see the 5 blocks through there. Over the time, the river, which had been a gathering place for over 40,000 years of the Darug people, had been sidelined for rail and industrialisation. Council's goal, working with McGregor Coxall, was to restore the city's connection to this ancient waterway. And we began with roundtables, engaging residents, businesses, schools and environment groups. Sorry, my notes are a bit scratchy. Through workshops and consultation, we uncovered ambitions for recreation, Aboriginal cultural recognition and environmental resilience. The strategy was shaped by a wide range of experts, but its real strength came from the hundreds of people, technical experts, designers, community and stakeholders who contributed. The project also sparked a deeper dialogue with the Darug community about the river's cultural significance, conversations that have continued to shape the city today. The last project I'll talk about, which I think Philip will pick up on after me, is the Civic Link. So culture really came into focus with the Civic Link framework plan. As Kelly's mentioned, it's a vision to connect Parramatta Square to the river via this new green spine through the heart of the city. As the city centre grew hotter with urban heat, denser with more residents and workers, and redevelopment began to displace artists and makers, we saw an opportunity to embed new public space, environmental outcomes and culture into the city's fabric through the Civic Link. This new public space was to have a central green spine with fine-grained frontages along its edges, and it included the Roxy Theatre, creative spaces and a proposed Aboriginal cultural walk. With design partners SJB and Aspect, we prepared a framework that secured the space, honoured the heritage and built a vibrant green corridor connecting people, nature and culture in the city. Over the course of time, the idea was so successful, it attracted a light rail station, a museum and a metro. I left City of Parramatta at the end of 2021, by which time we'd managed to encapsulate the Civic Link's essence into planning controls and we're beginning to work with Metro on capital works interfaces. And the Charles Street Square had also started to be delivered along the river. Good time to pass on to you, Philip.
Okay. Philip Vivian is an architect and urban designer who specializes in city transformation. He studied global cities and urban design at the London School of Economics and Columbia University, New York. He's the managing director of Bates Smart, having led the Sydney studio since 1998. A specialist in large-scale architecture and urbanism, Philip has helped shape Sydney's architecture, transport, and public domain. He has led the planning and implementation of Sydney Metro's overstation development at Victoria Cross, Gadigal South, and Parramatta. Please welcome Vivian.
Thanks, Dina. I've got to say, when you read those bios, I always worry as you're coming down, what did I send you? You know, you start to go, oh no, this is not going to be good. Anyway, Dina asked me to address what is the role of someone in the private sector as an urban designer in urban design. What is our role? So by way of background, about 5 years ago, we were engaged by Parramatta Metro. As you know, Metro had acquired quite a large block, almost an entire city block, in the centre of the city, and it was a block that the Civic Link crossed. And I would say the role really was to bring together the requirements and also importantly the aspirations of state government, local government, transport, and another overlay is the commercial requirements, because there's quite a lot of development on our block. How do we do that? I think the simplest way to put that is to say we look at creating a framework of public spaces, and that is the legacy that we leave the city, and it will endure. The buildings will change uses even over the lifetime of a master plan. They'll even come and go over the next century, but the framework of public spaces, streets, lanes and parks is the legacy we leave for a city. So how do we do that? And I'm going to go fairly quickly. We always start with trying to look at country, understand what the country was, how it was used. If we're going to try to regenerate country, you need to understand what was there originally. What were the early settlement patterns? How did the city meet the river? There's a sense of water and why does the land fall towards the river? The early streets, that is George Street, of course, and you know that image. I think Dina showed it to you. We look at early cadastral maps and the sense of the city blocks, but also the scale of individual allotments and how that might affect the size of the land we're looking at, and indeed the scale of the city as it's developed historically. And of course we come to the present day. You look at the city, and Dina covered this very well. It's a small CBD core. It's defined by the river, parklands at the east and west and the train. And you can see the block that we were dealing with is right in the centre of the city. So we instantly felt that it had complete transformative potential, and it's framed by 4 city streets, and they are the 4 primary Georgian streets of the original plan. And so we said, what really is the potential of this site? As people have mentioned, there were master plans done by Parramatta City Council that guided what we were doing. We started by looking at the master plan City Council proposed. This is a figure ground diagram overlaid just looking at our site at this point, and we wondered about the low-rise buildings that are in the light grey. And our feeling was if we could actually open that up, open Civic Link up and create a generous public space in the middle of this site. We were guided by a sense that Parramatta Square was a plaza, a hard urban space. We felt, given Heat Island, that Parramatta needed a green space, a green heart where people could be with sun. And could we create, on this very large block, a large open green space that would, of course, deal with the increasing effects of Heat Island and climate change. And that space, as you see, could bring together the heritage aspects on the site, connect with Metro, have water elements that fell towards the river, have regenerative landscape and really create a cooling, healing and public space. So very quickly, that was the massing of the master plan we received, and very simply that's looking along, sorry I should have said, looking north along Civic Link, and we removed the 2 6-storey blocks to create a much bigger urban space as you travelled towards the river. So in a sense, we transformed what was a continuous link into, here was a place where the metro arrived. Another view, this is looking along Horwood Place, and when you remove it. And you can see how it actually integrates a series of heritage buildings and creates a place addressed by the heritage of Parramatta. And these were very, very early studies, and I recall presenting it to Calantha at a very early stage, and you can see there's no architectural detail, it's just about the scale of spaces. And then one final one looking south along Civic Link and the idea of that public space. So very quickly, by the end of the process, and very much as Philip went through, there's a series of layers that you look at for the complexity of the site. It starts with identifying heritage and the Civic Link that you can see running north-south, identifying where people come from transport. You've got the light rail on the side of the block, metro, the bus interchange nearby, and of course the heavy rail. We created this framework of streets and lanes, so it's a highly permeable site, offering people that ability to penetrate what is a very large city block. We created this large green space that we felt would add to the heart. Please finish, I'm being told. I said to myself, I won't look at the timer, that's the way I'll get away with it. And I made a mistake. And you can see how that space really there's a lot of density in the heart of Parramatta. We opened that up and created a green space in the heart of Parramatta. I am nearly finished, don't worry. We then, with the blocks that were left, created podium scale forms that were in scale with the historic buildings around this site. So it's something that would be correct in scale along the laneway, so it's an east-west laneway connecting Metro to Church Street. We created a vibrant lane, as you can see here. That's a 7-metre wide lane that will become a sort of vibrant, compressed space in contrast to the open space. And then, of course, the building envelopes go up and protect the solar plane to Parramatta Square. So they're flexible envelopes, but they will not breach the solar access to Parramatta Square. There was a residential building to the west, the more mixed-use part of the city, and the potential for mixed-use or commercial buildings to the east. And really, as I mentioned at the very beginning, all framed around public spaces of lanes, streets, and creating what we think might be a legacy is a large park in the centre of Parramatta. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Gigi Lombardi from Transport New South Wales. Gigi's a recognised urban design leader with over 25 years of experience delivering strategic, people-focused and design outcomes for transport infrastructure programs, planning and the public realm. Gigi's led the development of strategic policy, programs and projects that best practice standards. For the past 2 years, she served as Acting Director of Urban Design at Transport, where she's overseen statewide public transport and precinct programs. In this role, she's embedded high-quality, place-based urban design outcomes across all project phases, underpinned by strong stakeholder and community engagement. Her leadership and commitment to design excellence have been recognized through numerous state and national awards, reflecting her contribution to innovative, sustainable, and enduring urban design outcomes. Please welcome Gigi.
Thank you, Dina. And good afternoon, everyone. So I have been asked to talk to you about the role of urban designers at state government, with a focus, of course, in Transport for New South Wales. And I've also been asked to talk to you a little bit about light rail, Parramatta Light Rail Stage 1, and how it is a project that goes beyond just a public transport project, but also about city shaping and about making great streets. So I'm part of a team of 30 urban design professionals working for Transport for New South Wales. The team actually works across
policy, strategy, programs, and a variety of projects of all transport modes and precincts. The teams work from concept design, from planning, concept design, all the way through detailed design and delivery of projects, through all the phases of the life cycle of a project. Parramatta Light Rail project is a good example to talk a little bit about the role that urban designers play across a life cycle of a major project. I was very lucky, actually, to be an urban design lead for 6 years in this project, like from business case to planning, and really from detailed design to cutting of the ribbon. So I do feel that sometimes with these major projects, you can only be there for a certain amount of time. So being across that whole life cycle, it has actually really given me an incredible insight on how things really work. There are 3 core dimensions to the role of urban designers at state government. The first one is about the technical leadership. So the urban designers work within project teams of very specialised backgrounds, engineers, environmentals, and you name it. So there is that dynamic of having to work as part of that multidisciplinary team all the way through project life cycles in regards to finding the best solutions. Then there's the role of the client leadership, and this is the role of commissioning and managing consultants through working in a significant number of policies that transport has in urban design to inform projects and detailed design. And there's the other role of the stakeholder engagement, which is quite a significant role that we have, is collaborating from day one in any project, any work we do, with local government, with other agencies, with community groups, and so on. Through this, we actually bring together design professionals, urban designers, architects, landscape architects, all working for just really one common outcome: the design and creation of great, accessible, sustainable, attractive places. Urban designers as state government work at large scale, but also at small scale, all the way down to detail design. So if we use the light rail, for example, we work at large scale, identifying, understanding the precincts, understanding all those guidelines that we've actually heard in previous presentations, and how do they all come in to actually inform where the alignment goes, where the stops go. We then focus on street design arrangements and the configuration of all the elements of the streets, the trees, the seating areas, the connectivity, the crossing points, all the way down to the finer grain and the detailed design resolution, such as tree pits for civic spaces, for example. And you can get a bit of an idea when we look at this document that was created in collaboration with council and other stakeholders for Parramatta Light Rail Stage 1. It was the urban design requirements, which sets a clear vision, clear objectives, and very clear requirements from the start of the project. Urban designers are responsible for embedding design excellent processes and tools all the way through. So we work on urban design requirements, technical specifications, design reviews, but we also work on establishing and managing design review panels with the government architect. So the Light Rail project was really more than just about integration of transport mode. It was about transforming street into great places for people. The project presented an opportunity to revisit the whole street environment. If we look at Macquarie Street and East Street, we work with council to further strengthen that connectivity east and north-south that we just saw in those previous presentations. We shifted a car-dominated street with congested footpaths and lack of shade into accessible, comfortable environments that encourage activity and connection. Working with councils and very closely with businesses, we were able to reduce through traffic and pedestrians on each street, decluttered the street, and undergrounded a lot of power lines, prioritised shade and character with new tree species. And we unify materials and furniture to streamline that public realm, in other words, stitching that urban fabric. This was a key, significant role that urban designers had to play when we've actually seen all the previous presentations and about all creating place, and we have a very significant transport infrastructure project landing in the middle of it. The result has been a significant uplift in connectivity, urban amenity, activation, and identity. It's what I like to describe. It was an urban design project with a light rail in the middle. The light rail project is a good example that demonstrates the unique value of urban designers and what they bring to the table. Integrated transport with place, leading collaboration, and delivering outcomes that make our cities more sustainable, inclusive, and people-focused. Thank you.
Hold it, because maybe give it to Philip here. I'm going to ask a few questions that we've been given ahead of time. The first one is, now that we've heard about all the great ideas and the great ambitions, how have urban designers balanced the short-term reactive challenges that occur in every project with the long-term good urbanism goals in the public interest? We've all been there, where we have to meet that challenge.
It's not an easy question. I think one of the values of having urban designers in council or in government generally is that they can have a longer view of where, and kind of keep that view going over time. There's changes in politics, changes in government, changes in staff, but it's that sort of focus to the long game and trying not to get too caught up in a light rail landing in the middle of your Civic Link, Gigi, or a metro coming, and just kind of keep going with that broader. I mean, it's been great to see that the evolution across this panel of some of those projects from lines on the page to something more significant, and they changed across the whole thing. Does anyone else want to take that?
Yeah.
I can try elaborating a little bit more from light rail perspective. It's such a great question. It happens all the time with everything we do. I think what urban designers do bring to the table is that view, that the future planning of the spaces. So being able to, what we call, choose the priority, choose the battles, and ensuring that we don't go backwards. This was a classic example that we experienced for the light rail project that cannot deliver everything, but absolutely can enable future change. So ensuring every time you're designing, whether it's at small scale or larger scale, how do you actually leave those opportunities for the next round to come along and keep building upon? So you can do lots of very good short-term things, as long as you're thinking bigger picture, long vision, and ensuring that we don't go backwards or the work is not made redundant.
Perhaps add to that from the private sector point of view, because we work with a lot of developers who are absolute experts at the short term. And on this project in Parramatta, we were told for years what they wanted was the largest possible floor plates of office that we could get. And now they tell us they do not want office. Whatever we do not put office there. So it flips from one side to the other. And I would say how you deal with it is that it's the public domain plan that's sacrosanct. Let all the private buildings and different requirements shift around that, but just hold on to the public domain plan and the public spaces. Everything else can move.
I have a different question for the two of you. So designers in government aren't always holding the pen, but they bring their skills and knowledge to multidisciplinary teams and shepherd better, more holistic outcomes for the city. Kelly and Philip, could you expand on your experience as a design leader in a governance role?
Thank you. Thanks, Dina. To I guess the panel's points today, the vision, embedding that is absolutely fundamental. And when you have that support, either via a legislative framework or an endorsed vision through council, it gives you that leverage to negotiate when you're not holding the pen, so that you can take it to those other stakeholders who are driving a design, and you can lean on those foundational principles to, battle it out, as we often have to do, to ensure that ultimate vision. So I think having the underlying policy and vision in a strong framework gives you that strength to argue for that ultimate outcome as required.
I think it comes down to what I'd call design governance, and what I mean by that is when you have the highest level plans, they talk about giving effect to, but if the objectives aren't spatialised at the highest levels, it doesn't really mean very much, to be honest. And there's been a really interesting case. So we worked in the planning partnership with the GSC, and there's actually spatial objectives and urban design principles in the Metropolitan Plan about creating cool green parkland city, which sounds nice, but there's specifics, oriented development to the creeks, etc., etc. There was a land environment court case that just came out in the last 2 weeks. A proposal was refused on the grounds that it didn't fulfil the landscape-led principles and country. And we wrote a document called Recognised Country with Ellie Davidson and others, and it's very clear, and it explains to a developer what it is you need to do. So rather than just saying design with country, it said, have you identified the ridges? Have you identified the creeks? Have you created the connections? And will there be public access? Because otherwise you can't walk on country, it's meaningless. And there was enough physicality without being overly prescriptive in the objectives that could lead the court to refuse an application for not recognising country. It's a really important principle. And again, that's why I keep rabbiting on about this planning urban design divide. If there's no spatialisation, it makes no sense. But if we, and the urban the public domain is important, but beyond that, when we look at climate change, private development is more than 50% of the land take. If private development isn't part of these infrastructures I'm talking about, we cannot bring down temperatures. It's 50%. It's physically impossible. So unless the private land and the public land performs, it just can't work. So this going from state to local and looking at these infrastructures, being clear on objectives and spatialising what are the spatial consequences, we're going to have serious problems. And I think it's a big challenge. And having a layer like a Greater Sydney Commission, if we just keep putting layers rather than addressing governance, I think there's some serious questions about what might actually work. The experience around the world is taking the hard and the soft powers of design and regulatory as a system rather than starting with one and then going to assessment. You just end up with number ticking. You're not getting the iterative, and I think that's where we have to go.
Okay, we're almost done, but we have one final question. You can all have a go, or just a few of you, up to you. What do you see as the most immediate urban design action to shape a better future for Parramatta as a place for people?
I'm going to speak from my current role. I think Parramatta Park is a massive opportunity for the city, and to some of the points that have been made earlier around, I like pods, around park-oriented development. I think this is a city with a lot of density and a lot of parkland, and the way that the city starts to connect with the river and its park, and what happens more broadly with Parramatta North through that area, I think is a real opportunity to kind of better connect with culture as well as the city, and the light rail has kind of opened that up as well through its broader network. So I think it's exciting to see what happens next in that respect.
Something to that. I totally agree with that, Kalantha. I think the other area of priority that we look at is what's happening towards the Camellia precinct and being able to open up that connectivity in all aspects, not just transport, people, cyclists, and making use of that river edge that it's calling for connectivity. But definitely, I think I see the next big chapter and big challenge is Camellia and connectivity. Thanks.
Two quick suggestions. There is a thought of a high-speed rail coming through Parramatta. I think it needs to be planned for and integrated sooner rather than later. It may not happen for 100 years, but let's at least plan for it. And number two is establish a design review panel, state government design review panel, that looks over the whole of all of the things that are happening in Parramatta and make sure they're pulled together. Thanks.
Thanks, Kalantha. One of the biggest challenges, I think, from where I'm sitting is I would call it hyperdensity that is proposed not only from the built form and amenity outcomes that we are contending with, the way in which people will live in those towers, the way they will integrate or relate to the public domain, but the balance of jobs and people living in the city, and currently that is being challenged by the state government and its HDA, the Housing Delivery Authority, in trying to rapid fire the housing challenges we have. So if we can't get that balance right, we will have lovely parks around us, particularly to the west, but it's how people will be living in this city and how they will be engaging with these spaces which really matter. So I think that's our biggest challenge.
Okay, well, thank you all very much thank the panel for all your great insights and experiences, and thank you all in the audience for coming to hear us today.